Another day had passed, and despite it being another one of her normal days in the park, Nikki's thoughts had wandered off to the weird, unreal dream she has had last night. She could remember everything clearly: the odd room, the numbers written on the ground with the blood, the lampposts, and how she had become a lamp herself. But the most scary thing was that she could still remember it so clearly. Even the cold, lingering feeling of loneliness that she had felt when she had entered the dark, unrelenting room. And although she was afraid of having to visit this place again, Nikki was still curious about the other doors she had seen in this big room. Where would they lead her? Would she see them again? Nikki went to bed and soon fell into a deep slumber. The balcony. Again, she had woken up on her balcony, and the instant she left her apartment, she knew that this was the same dream as before. She saw the same doors standing there in this empty and foreboding field. This time she decided to take the next door. It was a steel door with some blinking lights on it forming a rectangle. Nikki found herself surrounded by all sorts of weird, deformed creatures. Most of them had giant eyes and were blinking in some way, changing colors from red to yellow to green to blue. Fascinated by this light play, Nikki had a hard time pressing on. But after a while, curiosity got her, and she walked towards one of the creatures. As she came close to it, the glowing light worm let out a slurping sound, but didn't stop to take a look at her. Nikki wondered how it could have done that, since it didn't have a mouth nor a tongue. She approached another creature, but all of them didn't seem very interested in her and simply ignored her, so she decided to explore this dark place for a bit. It was only now that she noticed the robotic faces littering the ground here and there. Walking over them made a funny chirp-like sound, and Nikki spent some time walking around on them. After a while, a few walls appeared in front of her, and Nikki's curiosity took over again, leading her into a little room enclosed by these walls. She was greeted by a brightly shining room, light coming from the walls, which were decorated in all colors imaginable. As she walked through the giant maze that lay in front of her, Nikki couldn't take her eyes off the beautiful and colorful formations on the walls. Suddenly, she ran into a parrot-like creature, and before she knew it, it had disappeared. But just like the lamp in her dream, it has left a card laying on the ground. This one simply said neon. As she picked it up, she noticed that her hand had become invisible, and afraid, she withdrew it, unsure if she should pick the card up. But as her hand returned to visibility, she decided to take the risk and pick the card up. Again, the sensation strived through her body, but this time it was a bit different. It had a different aftertaste, if you want to call it that. Nikki looked at her hands again, and was more than surprised to see that they were illuminated, just like the walls and the creatures around her. Her hands were only outlines, consisting, changing colors from red to yellow to green to blue. She had become one of them. Suddenly, she heard voices from behind, and noticed that she could now understand the neon creatures talking. She went up to one of those creatures, asking what this place was and what they were doing here. It replied that this was the world of colors, created by a god they called the Big Processor. Apparently, this world was located deep inside a giant supercomputer, so small that it would forever stay invisible to humans. Soon another creature joined, and asked Nikki for a place of origin. After she had responded that she was one of those humans, the creatures quickly withdrew from her in fear. What had she done wrong? Why did these neon creatures fear humans? Weren't the humans their creators? Irritated, Nikki decided to go on with her exploration, and she soon reached a room with a door at its end. On the other side was what seemed like another part of the color world. Before her feet lay a path, created by blinking blue and red stones. Not wanting to wander off into the darkness again like she had done before, Nikki decided to follow this path wherever it may lead to. As she passed over the illuminating stones, they let out squeaking noises. It almost sounds as if they feel pain, Nikki thought, but she continued on. To the sides of the path she saw weird puddles of something red. It looked like they were moving in some way, defying the laws of physics. Even though she had enjoyed her stay here so far, this part of the color world made her a bit afraid. Maybe it was because of the darkness surrounding her once again, maybe because of the weird puddles, or maybe it was because of something else, but Nikki's desire to wake up was growing with every moment that had passed. Suddenly she saw, well, she couldn't call it a creature, but she saw something. It looked like it was walking, but it didn't have any legs, so how could it walk? It was a creature consisting of two moving, rotating, floating blocks in front of her. As she tried to speak with it, she suddenly felt very tired, and before Nikki knew it, she was unconscious. End of part A.